In this video, I'm going to talk about how I made the chisels I use for making katana scabbards. I'm not going to actually make a chisel in this video, but I'll describe the process in detail and show many images of the chisels. You'll know exactly how it's done by the end of this video. I'm also going to address some misunderstandings about saya chisels that I've seen in YouTube videos and on discussion forums. Let me just say up front that I've been extremely happy with how these chisels function. They make scabbard making much easier. I couldn't be happier with them. However, mine are not what you'd call beautiful tools. I purposefully used the simplest method possible for making them because my goal was a tool that was fast, simple, and straightforward to make. Now there are certain features that scabbard chisels must have, and here there can be no compromise. Without those features, there's no point in making the chisels. But there are methods for making tools with those critical features that are within the grasp of anyone, even a beginner, and it's these methods that I'm going to discuss in this video. I made my set of 3 chisels from a single bar of W2 knife making steel. If you'd like to make yourself a set of these chisels, I'll put a link to that steel in the description. There's enough steel in a single bar to make as many as 6 to 8 chisels if you want that many. I begin by sketching out the cuts I plan to make in the steel. Each chisel blade will be 6 inches long, and the widths will be 24 millimeters, 19 millimeters, and 12 millimeters. I use an angle grinder with a metal cutting wheel to cut the steel. Next, I take the newly cut chisel blade blanks and rough out the lateral bevels and edge bevel with an angle grinder. Then I pretty up those bevels with my knife grinder and a grinding jig. Check out my video on plane making to see how I use the knife grinder and jig. At this point, I add 2 features to the chisel's shape that are unique to scabbard chisels and that are absolutely critical to their performance. The first is a rounded belly, a convexity along the entire length of the blade. You can see the shape of this convexity when looking at the tip of the blade end on. I produce this effect by roughing out the shape with an angle grinder and then prettying it up on the knife grinder using a slack grinding attachment. The second feature is an almost imperceptible curve from toe to heel. I produce this effect by heating the entire blade blank in the forge and gently and carefully bending it ever so slightly. At this point, the blade blank is finished and ready for heat treatment. I want the chisel to be as hard as I can get it, and unlike when quenching a katana blade, I'm not terribly worried about it cracking during the quench. I use my tabletop kilns for heat treating because I can control the temperature to within just a couple of degrees. First, I place the blade blanks in a kiln set to 1650 degrees Fahrenheit and let them soak for a half hour. Then I quench them in room temperature water, keeping them moving to prevent formation of a vapor cloud and making them cool as quickly as possible. Then I temper them in a 400 degree Fahrenheit kiln for a half hour. I only want them to reach 400 degrees. I don't want to leave them there long. For the chisel shanks, I use 3/8 inch diameter mild steel rod cut in 6-inch lengths, which I weld to the heel of the chisel blades. All I own is a cheap stick welder, and I'm not an expert at using it, but it gets the job done. Again, I know this isn't the most beautiful way to make a chisel, but I purposefully selected a fabrication method that was as simple and straightforward as possible. One important note is that the joint between the shanks and the heels is not straight, but set at about a 15-degree angle. And for the handles, I took a 1-inch diameter dowel, cut it into handle-length pieces, drilled a 3/8 inch hole in them, and affixed them to shanks using 2-part epoxy. I finished the handles with simple clear polyurethane spray finish. The only thing left to do is sharpen the edge bevel, which I did using my knife grinder up to 800 grit. Then 800, 1000, and 1200 grit water stones, followed by a leather strop and sharpening compound. For an excellent tutorial on how to hand sharpen woodworking tools, I recommend watching Rex Kruger's video on that topic, which I'll link in the description. At this point, there's something about scabbard chisels that I'd like to clarify, as I've seen some confusion on this in YouTube videos and on discussion forums. The cutting edge of Japanese scabbard chisels is rounded, but this is not because you purposefully round the edge when sharpening them. Instead, this rounding naturally emerges when you sharpen the edge bevel perfectly straight and flat, just as you would an ordinary straight chisel. So why do you get a rounded cutting edge when sharpening the edge bevel perfectly straight and flat? It's because the belly of the chisel isn't flat, but rounded from side to side. When the straight flat edge bevel meets the rounded belly, it produces a rounded cutting edge. Most videos and discussions online about Japanese scabbard chisels seem to suggest that the rounded cutting edge is produced by taking a flat-bottom chisel and purposefully rounding the tip. Several sources I've seen even suggest that you can produce the correct geometry by taking a normal flat-bottom chisel such as you might buy at a hardware store and simply regrinding the cutting edge so that it's round. This is not really true. The cross-sectional geometry of scabbard chisels is different from ordinary chisels, and the rounded cutting edge emerges in a different way. And these differences, plus the toe-to-heel curvature, result in a chisel that cuts differently, one that cuts much better for the purpose of scabbard making. Alright, this has been our discussion of how to make simple, yet perfectly functional saya chisels. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel so I can continue bringing you content, please consider purchasing some of my W2 steel for knife making. I don't believe in asking for handouts, which is why I support this channel with income from the sale of something I think you'd like. Again, I'll put links to the steel in the description. In my next video, I'll demonstrate using these chisels and the planes I made in my previous video in making a scabbard and handle for a katana. Stay tuned.